Hello everyone, I'm Olive Boy, and this is another episode of Vintage vs. Modern, a series in which I look at two pens, or sometimes more, a younger one and an older one, to see how pen design has changed over the past couple of decades. Today, I'm going to be showing you two more very cool Japanese fountain pens, the Pilot Custom 67 and its younger sibling, the Pilot Custom 74, with which you might be very familiar. The Custom 74 is an immensely popular pen, and is often recommended very highly as like a first gold nib pen, which for a lot of people is like a really big first step. So with the availability of a bunch of different colors, a lot of people go for this pen just because it's dependable. You can get it in a decent amount of different nib sizes and it just works really well. However, some of you may be unaware of the fact that it actually has a predecessor, the Custom 67, and it is very similar, but there are some key differences. The 67 was first released in 1985, which is 67 years after Pilot's founding in 1918. You'll notice that is a theme in a lot of their naming schemes. It is a pretty simple, cigar-shaped pen, black with gold trim, and for that reason it became very popular. It was a relatively inexpensive way to get a very well, strongly performing pen that looks classy, doesn't stand out too much, but would fit well into a professional environment. A couple of years later, in 1992, the Custom 74 came out as kind of almost like a trim upgrade. It is functionally the same pen, but there are some cool little differences that I thought, being that the 74 is such a popular pen, some people would want to see how the older version compares to it. The 74 comes in a million different colors, I believe, with special editions like this beautiful yellow Itoya one, attracting a lot of attention whenever they come out. I'm excited to show you the difference between these two. So let's get right into the comparison. All right, folks, let's get started as always with our vintage pen of the day, the Pilot Custom 67. So some people wouldn't even consider this a vintage pen. Of course, being released in 1985, that's not really that old in the grand scheme of things, but it is the vintage-er of the two. So this is I would say, pretty standard size pen. I would say like not oversized or undersized. It's 140 millimeters capped, and uncapped, which is a screw cap, is 123 millimeters long. Underneath the cap, you have a number 5 sized 14 karat gold nib. This one is an extra fine, and it is, the same yellow gold tone as the rest of the pen. The weight is pretty standard. It's about 22 grams, so it's a light plastic pen, and it has the Con 70 filling system, which is a button fill that is kind of a pain to clean out, but it does hold the most ink out of all of Pilot's ink converters, so people enjoy it for that reason. The pen itself is, like I said earlier, just standard looking pen. It is a black plastic pen with some trim. It's got a gold ball clip, classic to Pilot. It's got those two little bands on the cap. It's got a little Pilot marking on the like underneath the cap bands, and then the little trim ring at the bottom. But it is a very straightforward, utilitarian business pen, I would say. Very business pen. So the Custom 74, on the other hand, is a newer pen, and as newer pens often do, it has a lot more bling to it. So things that I note that have changed are specifically the cap band, which is a good bit thicker, even though it's not it's a double band, so one of them is thicker, and then got them molded in like Custom 74 with the little star on it. It's a pretty similar clip, though I'll say it's a little bit thicker, and then the Pilot engraving is a lot more visible, and even the bottom little band there is a little thicker. Same screw cap, and I believe the 67 is before Pilot started numbering their nibs in the same way, so you won't see a size marking on it, but they are exactly the same size. Even though that the modern one is marked number 5 and then the vintage one is not marked with a, like a gauge. The nib on the 74 is rhodium plated 14 karat gold, and it's got some nice scroll work on there. But yeah, exactly the same size as a custom 67. So don't go looking for a much bigger nib or anything like that. Another thing to note under the hood is the addition of this second cap band transitioning into the the little tenon that holds the converter and screws into the barrel. So yeah, just honestly just blingier. And you can also see that in the advent of a lot more colors. I feel like that's something that's continuously happening. This pen was released in 1992, but this color I believe is like a 2018 limited edition. So Pilot is still making new colors of these all the time, and will likely continue to until seemingly the heat death of the universe. So this pen is here to stay. This pen, on the other hand, is long gone. Now let's get into some writing. All right, so for the Custom 74, it's got, again, that number 5 sized rhodium plated fine nib. It is nothing if not dependable. Pilot nibs of this size and age, I guess, are all pretty similar and just generally fine. Like they're nothing super spectacular. A lot of them suffer from a pretty dry upstroke, and that's something you'll see across a lot of different Japanese pens. The reasoning I've heard behind this is because when you're writing kanji, upstrokes are very sparingly used compared to other strokes, so it's not focused on when tuning nibs. In all the other directions, the nib's pretty smooth. It's really like there isn't that much to report on. It's a fine nib. It's not the smoothest in the world. It's not the worst nib in the world. It's just kind of okay. For me, I don't really know why these pens are recommended as a first gold nib, because I feel like this doesn't have any real market advantages over any other steel nib in a similar price bracket. A well-tuned steel nib, even from Pilot, will write just as well as this does. In terms of the 67, I can't necessarily, judge exactly how it was when it was new, just because it's an older pen. I don't know if this has been, modified in any way at all. The extra fine on this is a little bit wider and wetter, strangely, than the 74, but also just kind of scratchier. So I have some doubts that this is like, fresh out the box type of deal, but the upstrokes were actually writing better than the 74, but everything else was just, again, kind of okay. When I'm looking for a first gold nib, I like something that like has a marked difference over a steel nib, and these two don't really speak to me in terms of that. I think they are both fine, pardon the pun, but again, not anything too spectacular. Don't mind me just dipping the nib back in here to finish the nib drawing. If you're looking for a nice, fine, dependable nib, these you can't go wrong. But I feel like you could also just find something cheaper. If you really like this pen, go for it. But I think for a first gold nib pen, you should get something that feels more gold-like, for lack of a better word. So now you've seen all the objective information I can provide you on these two very similar pens. And as you can probably tell, I like these pens pretty much equally. I obviously prefer the yellow one, but being that that's pretty difficult to get your hands on, it wouldn't really make sense to get a custom 67 just because it is vintage now. Like, you can get a new 74. I'm sure you can get a 67 for cheaper maybe, but if you want any of the new cool fun colors that Pilot's making nowadays, I would definitely recommend going for a 74. I have a couple of things that I don't love about it. I don't love how small the nib is for the body. I would definitely prefer something like a 743 or 742, which are a similar style of pen, just with a bigger nib and more nib size options. But then again, you can't really get fun color options in those. Pilot does this really, frankly, annoying thing where they You can either get a fun filling system, a fun nib, or a fun color. You basically you get to pick two. You can't have them all. And it's frustrating because like a lot of people want something like, well, one of the pens that Pilot makes with the highest cult following, you could say, is the Pilot Custom 823 in clear, which counts as a fun color, and the vacuum fill is a fun filling system, but it's made in fine, medium, and broad. But Tokyo Pen Shop Quill will put a Falcon nib on it for you, or a Waverly nib on it for you. So those pens are extremely sought after for that reason. Pilot, once again, take notes. Make more fun nibs on your pens. Everybody wants them. Everybody wants them. Nobody doesn't want them. Give us colorful pens in cool filling systems. Like the Custom Heritage 92 is something along the lines, but it's just, again, a tiny little number 5 nib. So yeah, I definitely think these are a decent pen for the price. I think they're decent value. I don't personally own one. I've thought about getting one before, but I'd rather just wait a little bit and get just a bigger Pilot with a bigger nib. It feels like better value to me. But if you are looking for a kind of straightforward, just like a nice pen that will not fail you and has a decent ink capacity, you can't really go wrong with either the 67 or the 74. So, thanks for watching. And I will see you in the next episode of Vintage vs. Modern. Please, if you would like to see more content, subscribe. It would help me out a lot. I love making content for y'all, and it gives me the drive to keep going when I see that people are enjoying my content. Oh, be sure to follow me on Instagram at oliveboypens. I've been posting, some behind the scenes stuff, some separate pen content on whatever new pens I've been playing with. So yeah, I love talking to folks over there, and yeah, I hope to see you over there. Anyway, thanks so much for watching, and I will see you next time.